Welcome everyone. Today I'm going to be sharing my experiences and some tips and hacks on how to do and plan adventure traveling if you're over 55. I'm 61 and I have a lot of stuff to share and a lot of adventures still ahead of me. So let's get into this. First, a little background before I dive into the tips and the hacks. My adventure traveling started when I was 17 when I joined the U.S. Navy, and I've been traveling pretty much ever since. By the time I was in my mid 20s, I've been to more than 50 countries on 5 continents. Certainly have done more by the time I was 25 than most people who do things by the time they're 55 or even 60. In my crazier youth, I've been to the bars of Subic Bay in the Philippines. I got picked up by the Stasi police in East Berlin. That's a whole other story. I actually have a blog post on that on the blog. I'll put the link in there. It's a pretty funny story. And I've crossed more than one international border illegally. So I don't recommend any of that, but that's just a little bit of perspective of where I'm coming from. So if you're watching this video and you're looking for a bucket list of what to do in Europe or cruises or some type of travel like that, you're watching the wrong video. This video is really about if you want to explore the more wild side. You're a certain age and you want to do things differently or redo things like in your youth. So if you really want to explore wild, off the grid, off the beaten track places, whether it's in the Arctic like I did last year or in the Amazon like I'm going to be doing this year, this is the video for you. Let's get into it. All right, so first, some tips and hacks. Safety is really the number one thing, regardless of your age, whether you're 25 or 55 or 65. Safety is number one. So no matter what your age, safety always comes first. Make sure to research the places you want to explore and understand the local laws and customs and wear the appropriate clothing for the climate that you're going to be in and what you can expect, worst case scenarios, and carry the right supplies for your planned trips. That's key. Absolutely, safety is number one. And having a well-stocked first aid kit. I have a really great video I'll put in the comments on how to stock a custom-made first aid kit. These adventures all require a custom kit for that particular adventure. One of the pieces of essential gear for these adventures, regardless of age, and I've certainly used this many times in the last couple of years, is a Garmin InReach Explorer Plus device. It's a satellite communicator that allows you to track your position, GPS, regardless of where you are in the world. I've used this in the Arctic. I have used this in the Everglades. I will be taking this down to the Amazon later this year. It has an SOS button that if you press, you have to remove the little tab and press it, it will alert search and rescue worldwide. You do need to pay a little extra for that service, for an insurance, for extraction and rescue, but it is well worth the small minimal investment. In the description below, I will have a link to a video on how to use the Garmin InReach Explorer Plus. Number 2, let's talk about physical activity. Okay, being over 60 doesn't mean you can't explore, it doesn't mean you can't do things, but it also means you need to be in touch physically with your body. Many of us take medications. I take blood pressure medications. I take antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication for PTSD. So we all have our baggage at a certain age. It doesn't mean you can't have fun. You just have to also plan your physical activities. And you may have some physical limitations, whether that be hiking, climbing, high altitudes, things of that nature. So everybody has some physical limitations, and be aware of those and don't push beyond what you're comfortable pushing. Okay, so if you're hiking or kayaking or whatever you're doing, you need to train in advance. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I go to a personal trainer 3 times a week in preparation for my adventures, and I will train intensely for months at a time leading up to my trips. I usually do 3 times a week, a lot of cardio. This is not a rule of thumb. It's kind of like my benchmark of what I try to achieve here. I want to be able to walk 10 miles. I want to be able to bike 50 kilometers. I want to be able to paddle, kayak, canoe, or what have you for 2 to 3 hours nonstop. So that's kind of how I look at that. That's not what I'm going to be doing, but I want to be in the condition and the shape in order to do that. Number 3, research. It's important to do your research before you embark on any of these adventures. Research the places you want to visit, the transportation methods that are available, the climate, the weather conditions, the safety of the destination. A lot of the places I went to in Alaska were off the grid rather, and required a 4x4. There are only 2 or 3 places in Alaska that rent 4x4s for where I wanted to go. So it took a lot of research and planning to make sure I was able to go where I wanted without any restrictions from a car rental company or an insurance company. Gear is, I can talk all day about gear. I'm a gearhead. But the gear for these trips are quite different. The gear I bought and invested in for the Alaska trip is, all practical purposes, with the exception of 1 or 2 fly rods, useless in the Amazon. Different environment, different terrain, obviously different climate. So you need to have the right gear specifically that's going to work in that area. Now, I spent a lot of time in the Everglades, so a lot of my gear for the Everglades does translate to the Amazon. And the gear that I bought for Alaska is going to translate a lot of that for when I take trips up to the Canadian Arctic or to Iceland. So you don't have to invest new every time, but kind of make sure the gear you have is the gear you need where you're going. Because once you are in these off the grid, off the beaten track places, there is no going to a Walmart or a Target to resupply. What you bring in is what you have. So, again, research what you're looking for. In all these extremely remote, adventurous places present different challenges. Obviously, in Alaska, a big concern was bear safety and extreme temperature differentials, even in the same day. And in the Amazon, the issues there really are malaria, yellow fever, and poisonous snakes. So each of these require different gear, different preparations. Obviously, for the yellow fever and the malaria, it's medical preparations. Maps. Can't talk enough about maps. Okay, besides being a gearhead, I can spend hours looking at maps online and paper maps. Review the maps of where you're going, and not just Google Maps, which are great. Buy and invest in real topo maps, okay? And take them with you. Don't rely on GPS mapping. Have it as a tool and a resource, but make sure you have topo maps of where you're going, and learn and know how to use and read a topo map, and obviously a compass. Number 4, start slow. I didn't jump into Alaska, or I didn't jump into going into the Amazon trip. I built up. Once I decided I wanted to go back to my adventure travel routes, I started really a lot of thought, starting slow. For me, I live in South Florida. It's 30, 45 minutes to the Everglades. So I spent a lot of time in the Everglades, testing my gear, acclimating myself to certain things, understanding how my gear is going to work in the field, in real life situations. And also, so you want to start small with some day trips and things like that. And that really helps. Number 5 is probably the most fun part, is really deciding on where you want to go. Pick your destination. So it's important to find the right destination for you. I can't tell you where to go or what to do. That's you. That's your adventure, not mine. But make sure you also consider your physical ability, your age, and health issues you may have in doing something that's extreme. And especially if you're doing it solo, like I did my trips. I'm doing most of my trips solo. Plan activities that you can handle, that you're comfortable with. I have really bad feet. I'm not going to plan a 10-mile hike. Although I do train where I can walk that far, I don't plan on doing that. Having the physical ability and to push through that pain is different than me planning a hiking trip. Planning and picking your destination. I spent almost a full year planning my 3 week trip to Alaska. So that was a lot of planning and logistics for a solo trip, poring over maps, destinations, contacting guides, contacting lodges. All kinds of work go into that and building out that itinerary so you have the maximum amount of time on the ground to enjoy your adventures rather than trying to figure out where the hell am I and how am I going to get to the next place. Goes without saying, make sure wherever your destination is, you're comfortable with the local laws and customs, especially if you're traveling overseas. But even in the United States, there are a lot of different things to consider in traveling, especially if you're planning on taking firearms, hunting knives, big game, fishing lures and hooks. So, you need to check with the local authorities as well as the airlines what you can and how to bring firearms and other things that you may need on your trip. And lastly, a fun thing to do is seek out other people. There's a million places online you can do that, and contact people online in different forms, whether they are mountaineering or fishing or what have you. But beyond the online, okay, nothing beats local knowledge. So when I was in Talkeetna, I meet some people at some local people at a bar, and we start talking, and I learn some new tips and ideas of to do in the Denali area for that leg of the trip. And when I was heading up to the Arctic, I similar met people in Fairbanks and later up on the Dalton Highway, trading tips and ideas with virtually strangers on the road. But you're getting that knowledge. You're giving them your information. They're giving you their information, and it really helps make a trip even that much more meaningful when you have that human connection. So those are the tips that I can impart on you. If you're in your mid-late 50s, over 60 years old, and you want to do some adventure travel, again, I'm not talking about taking a cruise somewhere. I'm talking about really getting out there, whether you're doing it with a partner, a friend, or solo, or a small group. Just do it. As they say, just do it. All right. Happy trails.